Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hi, hello. This is Pod Maverick. This is Pod Maverick After Dark. I'm going to be straight with y'all. This is the second time we're doing this because we recorded about 16 minutes or so of a podcast, and I swear on everything that is holy and my grandparents' grave that I clicked the go live button, but I did not. So me and Jordan with me have been talking into the void for about 16 minutes. So we're just going to remember everything we said and just repeat it. So no harm, no foul. This is Josh Bowe. This is Pod Maverick After Dark. I'm editor of MavsMoneyball.com. I'm joined by Jordan Brodess, another senior editor, MavsMoneyball.com, one of our draft experts. Jordan, tell me again, how do you feel to be on the pod tonight?
Well, I was already saying that it felt like it was self-fulfilling prophecy and all of that, but now repeating myself, it's feeling more and more prophetic, this whole experience, or we're in some sort of twilight zone. But because I feel like not just the fact that we just talked about what happened here with the Dallas Mavericks pick, but because Dereck Lively, who they selected with a first-round pick tonight, he is probably the most talked about prospect from Mavericks fans online over the last few weeks. So it sort of feels like this was all just meant to be, that we were marching toward Dereck Lively as a Maverick one way or the other. And the thing that I mentioned earlier and what we've talked about already is that earlier today, Josh and I were going back and forth about what was going to happen with this pick. And he was saying that he didn't think that Lively was where the Mavericks were going to go. And I said, I think it's possible. And I said that it's only going to be okay as long as they trade back and either get a contributing veteran player, or if they can shed one of these salaries that we know for a while the Mavericks have been looking to eliminate from the cap. So they did that. So I think I am required to be happy. I think that Lively brings some interesting things to the table. He wouldn't have been the player I necessarily would have gone with at 10 or maybe even 12. But if the Mavericks were, and this I think is probably the biggest point to remind ourselves tonight, is if the Mavericks are going to pick Lively at 10, and intel coming into tonight suggested that the Mavericks were interested in Lively at 10, that if that's the case, the fact that they were able to still pick him at 12 and shed Davis Bertans' salary, which was somewhere, I think we said around 16, 17 million, and create this traded player exception, then that has to be seen as a positive. Whether you think Lively is the short-term or long-term best prospect for them to take, if that was their guy at 10 and they were able to do some maneuvering and still get him, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's unequivocally, objectively good business what they did so far tonight. And I don't think anyone can really object to that. I mean, you took a player you were interested in 10 anyway. In the process, you got rid of one of your worst contracts. You now have the full MLE mid-level exception, which is about 12 million, as our astute commenters are putting in the chat. Which 12 million a year can definitely get you somewhat like a starting level player. Hell, Bruce Brown, Denver Nuggets, their 6-man dynamo. His contract was just like a little over 6 million a year with their exception that they signed him with last year. So yeah, it's good business. You still get the player you wanted. You didn't lose out on the guy they wanted, who it's clearly they wanted Lively. It's clear that's the guy they zeroed in on. I would imagine maybe if an Anthony Black or Taylor Hendricks got to them, maybe we'd be having a different conversation, but it's clear that they had contingency plans for if the guy we want falls, we'll stay at 10. If not, we've got a trade in place, and that's what they did, and that's all we can ask for. They didn't dump the pick, just the dump salary, like that was some of the sum of all fears worst case scenario. They still took a player and dumped a contract and made their offseason maneuverability a little bit easier. Having said that, I understand why some people are bummed. Good business does not always mean it's the most exciting or the flashy move. I talked a couple weeks ago about DeAndre Ayton and why I wouldn't want to give a center that's not a star $30 million plus a season, because I feel like you can draft these role player centers like a Rob Williams, like a Rudy Gobert, those types of players, Mitchell Robinson. Those guys are always there in the 20s, top of the second round. Even Maxi Kleber was an undrafted free agent. So I've always thought that investing into a center, unless it's like a star quality center, is not the best use of resources. This nudges up against that stance a little bit for me, because 12 isn't like necessarily a pick you use to get stars, but it's also, it's not necessarily a pick in the 20s. So I understand, there's a bit of trepidation because Dereck Lively he's a raw prospect. He only played about 20 minutes per game at Duke. He came on really strong at the end of the year from what I understand. And then I think the big thing for me is I want to say before, Jordan, I'm going to kick it to you to maybe talk more about Lively because you've watched more of him than I have. There's a tendency after the draft, you fall in love with guys, and then the team doesn't draft the guy you want. And I've been guilty of this. I mean, Jordan makes fun of me for my Desmond Bane ranting, ravings, and Slack for the last 3 or 4 years. It doesn't know, falling in love with a guy in the draft, especially when you're not like in the top 3, when it's not like preordained, when there's a lot more movement happening, when it's your turn to pick, it's just tricky business because it's not how it works out. These guys are also 19, 18. I think is Lively still 18 or is he 19?
I think that might be right. I'll have to double check.
I think he's still technically 18. Maybe I think he'll be 19 by the time the season starts. We don't know. We don't know. Like, we do our best to talk about these guys and project forward. Like, that's the game. But we really don't know. These guys are kids.
He's already 19.
He's already 19. Okay, either way, still 19, very young. Like, when Josh Green was picked, I didn't like the pick. I was obviously very upset. I wanted Desmond Bane. Obviously, Desmond Bane is currently a better NBA player than Josh Green. But as Josh Green has shown in the last 12 months, a lot of progress and development, and he's already doing things I would have never guessed from watching him his rookie year or watching his college. He was like a 40% shooter in the paint in college, and last season, he's shooting 50% on floaters. Like, we don't know. Like, no one would have said that Josh Green would have been able to do that. These guys are 19. They could turn into a lot of different things, and I feel like having a hard stance of this guy, like, I'm mad at this pick. This guy stinks. He's 19. He hasn't played an NBA game. We don't know. And all we can go on is, for me, it's more like player archetype and role. I would prefer the Mavericks invest their most precious resources into bigger athletic wings. But hey, the best big athletic wings were gone by 10. Taylor Hendricks off the board, Anthony Black off the board, Jarris Walker off the board. So I understand the Mavericks' point of view. Hey, they took someone really big and athletic, which I can't, I think I'd honestly rather have someone like Lively than someone like Cason Wallace, who I think you could argue Wallace might be a better NBA player, or at least a better NBA player quicker. But Wallace is also like a 6'3" guard, and I'm tired of the Mavericks having 6'3", 6'4" player. Like, I want some big guys. So again, I'm getting kind of long-winded. I want to kick it to you, Jordan, to talk more about Lively. But I just think if you're disappointed with this pick, I understand. And I'm not saying Lively is going to work out. He could bust. All these guys could bust. But I just think putting a fast and hard definitive stance on a 19-year-old that hasn't played an NBA game yet, let's just cool the jets a little bit and let's see what happens. And worse, at least at the very least right now, we could say, hey, they got off the Bertans deal. They opened up the MLE. That's objectively good. And then we hope for the best with Lively. Jordan, what do you kind of think about Lively as a player?
I think, the Mavericks for several seasons now have been longing for a rim protector and someone who can provide some sort of, rebounding, which you can debate whether Lively brings that rebounding or not. But what you're getting in Lively is exactly the reason that they told us they were signing JaVale McGee last summer. It is they have wanted someone who could be not just the rim protector that you thought maybe JaVale McGee was going to be, but also someone who can be a lob threat. They have that tandem in Dwight Powell in previous seasons with Luka. He's created some chemistry with Luka as a lob threat, but Powell does not bring any of the rim protection that Lively does. So in Dereck Lively, you're getting the rim protection. You're probably getting it from day one. There's a huge learning curve for big men, especially non-elite big men, elite prospects being like a top 5 prospect. There's a huge learning curve when it comes to defensive rotations and stuff like that. But you're getting someone who I think will possess those skills probably off the bench from day one, which is a huge plus. Is he going to be able to clean up all of the other defensive problems, and maybe why, Josh, you would want to lean toward finding a perimeter defender rather than a in the paint defender? I don't know that he's going to be able to do that, but he's a smart defender and has good timing and good athleticism. That's the main reason you'd be bringing in Lively. That I can't imagine that there would be another reason that you'd be bringing him in, because he does have his limitations. Outside of lob threat, he doesn't do much else offensively. There's some flashes of potential as having a jump shot, but I don't think that that's happening anytime soon. But he will finish lobs, and on another team, maybe that limitation gets exposed, but hopefully playing alongside Luka, that should be his only job anyway. You'd like someone who could maybe provide some pop threat from a pick and roll. But if you're pairing him with Luka and maybe Kyrie Irving, and you have other shooters surrounding the perimeter, then having that lob threat, that he is a very good lob finisher, then, that would be the reasons why. There are other questions about his defense or his offense. His fouling is maybe the most concerning. I think Matthew Phillips at the website, he wrote just like 48 hours ago, wrote a profile on Lively for us, because we realized that he was moving further and further up the draft board, and we didn't have a piece on him yet, even though we had talked about him so much. But I think Matthew wrote in that piece that he is averaging something like 8 fouls per 100 possessions, which is sort of jaw-dropping, and is going to be the reason that he is not on the floor very often as a rookie, probably, because that's where big men see the biggest learning curve, is they end up fouling. And it was the same reason that Jaren Jackson Jr., who was just Defensive Player of the Year early in his career, he could not stay on the floor because of foul trouble. So if he
still has issues.
Yeah, yes. And he's just that good defensively that he can still make that impact. So I guess your hope would be Lively would have that similar trajectory, not to say that he'll be a Defensive Player of the Year, but that he can learn on the go as a defender and maybe not foul so much. But I would expect that will be our biggest complaint in year one with Lively is he's going to foul a whole lot.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things. The fan base always out for blood for Dwight Powell. Everyone is like, well, he's already better than Dwight Powell. I don't know who's going to start in October at center for the Mavericks, but I would not put it past Powell being the starting center. And that's not even me trying to knock Lively. Again, the things that we're trying to say is that it takes, the things that the big men have to learn in the NBA, especially for Lively, who didn't play a lot in college, like it just takes time. Like these guys, Tyson Chandler is the comp for Lively a lot. Like people love to say like he's the Tyson Chandler starter kit. Like Tyson Chandler didn't really unlock it until he got to New Orleans and he was 24 or 25 years old. And he didn't become the best player he is until he got to Dallas. He was 28. So, yeah. And like it's gonna, I'm not saying it's gonna take time. I'm just want people to realize that if he's not the starting center in October, like the pick is not a failure yet. There's things these guys have to learn.
Yeah, I think that to many of us, when we were talking about the prospect of Lively being the pick weeks ago, was the concern of time frame of like, it's not a question of can Lively grow into being a dominant defensive force in the NBA. I think a lot of us feel like he might be able to be that. The question is, how much time will that take? Because he is raw elsewhere in his game, how much time is it going to take for him to grow into that, to be the dominant starting center that the Mavericks maybe are looking for? Do they have that time frame with what they're trying to build around Luka? That's where I think you had your concerns or your hesitancy in thinking the Mavericks would go in this direction, was because we knew it would take time. And everything we've heard from the front office since the season ended is a need for building a roster around Luka and Kyrie, whatever, that can allow them to bounce back quickly and make it back to the playoffs after what was an embarrassing this last season.
Right. I just didn't have it. I didn't, knowing the Mavs history, I know it's a new front office, but I just didn't think that they would take the guy that's going to need some time. Obviously, Luka is a cheat code. He will help Lively progress faster than if Lively went to, let's say, Washington or something like that. A team that doesn't have an established playmaker already, or even like if you replace Lively with I don't know, like if you went to Charlotte, obviously he's not going to get picked up. I'm just saying Luka helps because it's not a typical lottery team. He's not going to have to worry about offense other than screening and knowing where to be, which, by the way, that's a skill to learn. And he's not necessarily going to be able to do that day one. Dwight Powell had to learn it too. And I interviewed Dwight Powell years back, like around like 2017 or so, during the dark tanking years after Dirk was nearing his retirement. And because Powell didn't come out of college as one of those guys, and I asked him, I was like, everyone says that you just kind of, if you're tall and athletic, you can be a rim runner, but how, what did it take? And he's like, oh, I didn't know how to set screens. Like I didn't do any of that in college because he was like more like he shot jumpers in college. He played like more of a perimeter-based big man game. He's like, I didn't know how to screen. I didn't know how to read offenses. He's like, I thought only guards had to read offenses. Like I have to read the offense to know when to slip, when to roll, when to dive. I have to like, hesitate, keep up with my guard and the rhythm of the pick and roll. It's not just always rumble down to the rim as soon as you set the pick. I have to time when to release the pick. Like all this stuff he talked about. And it really opened my eyes in terms of like, it's just not that easy. And again, not saying Lively should be able to do this. He seems enthusiastic. Interviews he's been given, he seems to understand where his bread is going to get buttered in the NBA in terms of like how can he maximize his potential. So he's not going to be a guy that's I don't think he's going to be complaining about touches and things like that. I think he understands his role, which is nice, and that should help him. But it's going to take some time to learn. I think the big thing we should probably now pivot to is the reason why this pick was so contentious, I think, with some of the fan base is because of who they didn't pick. And the big name is Cam Whitmore, who it looks like is now going off the board at 20 to Houston. Mm-hmm. Wow. Whitmore and Amen Thompson on the same roster is kind of mind-blowing considering 24 hours ago. But that's a team that obviously doesn't care about immediate progress. So the Mavericks didn't take Whitmore. He was projected to be a top 5 pick. I think early mocks, most of them were taking him at 5 to Detroit. I don't think, like, when I started to fall in love with guys, I fall in love with Walker and Taylor Hendricks and Anthony Black. And I didn't even look at Whitmore because I just, like, everyone I talked to, it was just like, he's not going to be, like, he's going to be gone by like 6. Like, he's not going to make it. Like, don't even think about it. Like, just don't even think about it at all. So I never did. So that makes it kind of shocking that the Mavericks not only passed on him, but so many other teams did. But I think that goes to prove, like, there's obviously something wrong with his knee and his medicals. So I understand people getting upset in the moment, but the Mavericks aren't the only team that dropped on him. Obviously, down the road, it could look like a mistake, but I don't think we can crush the Mavericks too much for what's obviously some red flags popped up with his medical history.
Yeah, I mean, the context of all of that is, I think, coming into the week, it was seen as a top 9 draft board, and then kind of a jump from 9 to 10, and and so with the Mavericks being at 10, there was always this thought of like, well, that's maybe the motivation to start trading back, is because the value, kind of consensus value, was believed to be that after 9 there was a drop. So when it was Bilal Koulibaly out of France that was drafted inside that top 9, who was not projected to be there, we knew, looking at the board, that at least one of the 2 or 3 players that we were looking at, Taylor Hendricks being one of the others, that it would be there for the Mavericks. So when Whitmore is there, it felt like a victory lap in some ways. And had Cam Whitmore come off the board at 13, 14, 15, I would probably be pretty upset right now. But there's obviously something there that we don't know, that the league knows and has concern for, whether that be his medical history or otherwise. I would assume it's that, because his talent level would suggest, like you're saying, that he's a top 5 pick. So maybe it is a steal later on down the road, but enough teams balked at that I don't think you can debate that. I think the debate, if you were going to have it, is whether it would have been better, and you mentioned it before, of actually making that 10th pick for Cason Wallace as a like lockdown perimeter point of attack defender.
And you really liked him coming into the draft, didn't you? Or
yeah,
I don't know, really,
I mean,
it might be overselling it.
So, I mean, I guess Ian and I had some conversations that were published on the site that, I proposed to him earlier in the week, knowing that it was getting more and more likely that the Mavericks were going to trade back. And I thought it was probably going to be back to, like, I guess most of the sourcing and reporting was maybe back to 15, where Atlanta was, that they were going to be swapping picks. So I had asked Ian, if they go back to 15, who are the prospects? Who are the 2 or 3 guys that you think are must-haves? And that's where he and I were sort of like, well, we don't really know. There's no one that we definitely want in this range. So that's the other argument to be made for taking Lively, knowing that he's going to at least be brought in specifically to fill a need that the Mavericks desperately have, is that there weren't other players in that draft range that I was like dead set on. Cason Wallace was a guy that I was definitely interested in, and in that 12 to 15, 16 range, had the Mavericks been in that range, he would have probably been someone I would have been top of my board. I don't think I would have drafted him at 10, but yeah, that's really more potato at this point, because all of these players shifted around so much so quickly. But I think you and I think agree in not wanting to have the Mavericks adding more guys that are 6'2", 6'3" to the roster, but we also agree that we'd rather them have perimeter defenders or perimeter players. You're looking more at the 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" perimeter defenders, but that would have been the plus of having Wallace, is that the Mavericks just don't have anyone right now who can be like a bulldog defender on the ball, on the perimeter. And unless they add that here in the offseason and free agency in a trade, or unless Josh Green suddenly turns into that, they don't have that on the roster. So that's where I think the debate really is, not about Cam Whitmore, although I was very excited by the idea of them trading back and still getting him at 12. Yep. But looking at the rest of this list of names of guys that went from 13 to 20, there's no one that I would have been like, yes, this is the guy they had to have.
Yeah,
instead of Lively.
And that's why we talk so much about hoping someone would crash the party of that top 9, because we felt like it was such a teardrop from that pick down to the next tier of players. So yeah, it is shocking that happened, and then the Mavericks still didn't get one of those consensus top 9. But obviously, and then obviously the medical red flags are there, and then you think like if Houston didn't have the 20th pick, normally teams that are picking in the when you're in the 20, you're talking playoff teams now. He might still be like, is he still falling? Like Houston takes him because Houston is a team that has nothing to lose.
Well,
like
I mean,
so
the argument would be that you'd have a contender that's like, we don't really need to rely on this guy for the next season or two, so let's let him get healthy, and then we have the steal 3 years from now.
That's true.
I mean,
some teams,
that's not
Porter Jr.
Right. I mean, they were still drafting. I think Porter went 13 or something like that. So the Denver was, they took a shot, but it wasn't quite, spot 20. But that would be the argument, is that, if you're a real contender, then you can let him get healthy and develop. But no, I mean, I think there's maybe an argument to be had that you should have just picked Cason Wallace at 10, but clearly there were very few, if any, and that's one of the reasons that Lively continued to shoot up draft boards over the last several weeks. There are very few centers in this draft.
That's a big thing we haven't mentioned yet.
There's basically, I mean, I guess I'm looking at like a positional chart right now, or like a list. And, I think there were 1 or 2 people on staff that were higher maybe on Noah Clowney, who I think just got drafted or is about to get drafted by Brooklyn. Yep. He's the only other one that's not Victor Wembanyama in this draft that's an actual like center. So, there's other guys that could maybe be a little more positionally versatile in the draft, but if you really wanted a center, then that's the guy you take. So I don't think you can argue with that aspect of it.
No, and especially when, like you said, it was just, if Whitmore's off your board because of medical, so like he's not even a factor. Again, the list of players, Jordan just said, the tier of players available, they're all guards. They're all 6'3", they're all 6'4" guards, and the Mavericks already have Luka, they already have Kyrie, and honestly, like, Josh Green is more guard-like to me than wing-like in terms of, who is he going to be guarding. It would have been great to get a big wing there, but there just wasn't, just the way the board was falling. It would have only made sense if they traded back even more, which at that point, that's really hard to do. It's hard to trade back as is, because everyone likes to trade back. Everyone likes to still keep their draft pick and get some extra assets. So it is hard. See some people in the chat that are like, you guys, Mavs Moneyball, been wanting to draft people. You've been wanting to keep the pick. Y'all better be happy. Mark W told me he's the blue chip talent you wanted on the last podcast, Josh. I'm totally agree. I'm not trying to, if my cadence in this podcast has been that I'm disappointed with them taking Dereck Lively, that is not how I feel. He is an athletic badass, and the Mavericks need just as many of those as possible. I cannot wait to see him catch lobs. I cannot wait to see him just be someone that can move and run and jump.
And the other thing I'll say is that, I mean, I, as one of the few people that's super draft heavy and like the one that's always arguing that they should never trade a pick and always just make the pick no matter where it's at. I love that they made, I mean, they traded back and they made an actual pick of a guy that I think they are actually going to want to use. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't trade back to take Clint Capella and use Clint Capella as maybe a rental center. I mean, Clint Capella is obviously far more established and probably helps you win right now, maybe in the regular season and not the postseason. We don't have to get into Clint Capella. He's not going to be a Maverick. But my point is they're investing long-term in someone, and that is what winning organizations do in the long term. If they want to sustain success, if we believe that they have the patience to let Lively develop, which was our question at the beginning, but if they do have that patience, then this is the good move, because this is going to be sustained long-term development and growth and impact on a team, rather than trading the pick for a 1 or 2 year rental of a veteran, whether that's a wing or a center or whatever. I like this a whole lot more. Oh,
definitely. I think that's a good point where we need to stop and take a break, because we have to insert ads into this podcast. Otherwise, we do not get paid. This is my chance to tell everyone, do not skip through the ads, because that's how they track it, man. So if you want to see us be supported, do not fast forward through this upcoming ad break. We really appreciate your support. I'm glad you guys are listening. If you're listening live, it's not going to, we're going to take like a fake break. We'll be right back. If you're listening on the recorded, please stick with us through the ad break. Come back and listen. We've got more to talk about with the Mavericks trading back to 12, trading Davis Bertans, and drafting Duke center Dereck Lively. We'll be right back after this break.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all in one place so easy and streamlined, so I can spend more time on the rest of my business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Okay, we're back. And I think what I've been thinking about while you were talking, Jordan, about, this is what we want, this is what good organizations do. Even if some people have qualms about who they picked, it's less about who they picked and the process that goes kind of into it. And I think we both agree the process is sound here. There is something interesting, though. You mentioned it, I think, when you first started talking before the break, or the first kind of segment we were talking about this. It is kind of funny how you can kind of trace this pick like back years. Like the leading to like everything that led to this pick has been going on for like 5 years. Like the Mavericks have been searching for a center. Good Lord, you could tie this back to when they let Tyson Chandler go in 2012. Like this has been their white whale, right? They have been searching for a long-term answer at center. And we can go through some names, man. Samuel Dallenberg, DeJuan Blair, Brandon Wright. Oh my gosh, who else? Eddie Curry come in here for a hot minute?
Is Chris Kaman allowed to be involved?
Chris Kaman, Elton Brand, Nerlens Noel, Dwight Powell.
No, Josh, I'm so sorry.
I know. Bernard James. Guys, remember Bernard James? Like it has been forever. And now we're at, JaVale McGee twice JaVale McGee. He used to be on the team.
Kristaps, Willie Cauley-Stein, which is who some people have compared Dereck Lively to. It is a long.
It's been an odyssey. And some of that is, I can understand. I'm not saying I feel this way. I want to clarify. I do not feel this way, so do not get mad at me for presenting what could be a negative opinion. I apologize to everyone listening. But I do understand how people can look at what's happened, and then you think about it, it's like every move they made is trying to fix bad moves. They took Lively because JaVale McGee was one of the most disastrous offseason signings in the last couple of years. Like, let's just be honest. Like, if who they use their exception, like, let's say JaVale McGee was good and worked out for them, and they liked what he was doing, maybe they still take Lively. I don't know, but maybe they don't. You know, maybe they don't feel like the need to take him, and they tried to do something else. You know, they've been trying to swing for a center for so long that, you know, they have to take one here. I say have to. You know, they wanted to. And then, you know, Bertans, they trade down to get off Bertans' contract, which they traded Kristaps Porzingis for, who just got moved for maybe a slightly better. You can maybe nitpick if Washington got a better return for Kristaps than the Mavericks did. It's kind of about equal. But at the end of the day, it's still, they're dumping a contract they didn't want that they willingly acquired. So I can understand some fans maybe being a little disappointed that what they did with this draft was just trying to clean up messes, because I know a lot of people want this roster to just take a step forward. But part of taking a step forward is you have to clean, you know, the messes don't go away if you don't clean them up. So that's kind of part of it. But I just wanted to say, I just think it's funny that you can trace back this pick to the Mavericks' just weird quest to find a big man solution.
Well, and I mean, there is we do it the same way as fans, because every like third tweet that you see about the Mavericks and Lively over the last several weeks has compared him to Tyson Chandler, because that's what everyone's, I mean, obviously dream of what a Maverick center should be is Tyson Chandler. So you're absolutely right that this has not only been their white whale, but is also something that they have constantly been in search of, even before the Doncic era, but especially in the Doncic era. There's just been a turnstile of big men and like utility big men to kind of just fill that rim protection lob threat role, because as intelligent, like basketball intelligent as Dwight Powell has been and is, you know, I think Josh, you're the one that believes he's sort of been underrated because of the criticisms about his impact on the game, but he's, for as good as he is in the things that he does, he can't be the rebounder, rim protector that the Mavericks need. And so Lively is that. And even if it is indirect, if there's a lineage to the pick that goes back 11 plus years, 12 years, whatever it is, there's at least some hope that maybe this is that solution, because he's going to be on a controllable contract for quite some time. And even if they have to pivot at some point from him, hopefully he's developed enough. Teams are always looking for rim protectors. Yeah. So there will be trade value in his game from day one as well, because of that skill set. It is not something that every big man possesses in this version of the NBA. And so those are all positives. Those are all things, whether you think it's definitely not a flashy pick. I don't think anyone can argue that it's a flashy pick. But even if you feel a little down on the pick or uninspired by the pick, there's no way that you can discredit that aspect of it.
Yeah. And just the sheer athleticism boost he will bring. Like, I mean, I've been arguing for that for years, even when the Mavericks did make draft picks, you know, they didn't necessarily get guys with this type of athleticism all the time. Although they have, you know, Josh Green lately now. So they're finally starting to get some guys that can run and jump, which I've just been begging for a while. Looks like listener Harris, are you seeing that quote, the Michael Finley quote, Jordan?
I just saw it on my phone. I didn't see it.
That is the best quote ever. I've always loved Michael Finley. He's been one of my favorite Mavericks of all time, and this just keeps cementing it. If you're not, obviously, if you're listening to the recording, you've probably already seen it, but someone asked Finley, the Mavericks are doing their post-pick presser, answering questions about the Lively pick. Someone asked him if Lively feels all the Mavs holes for rebounding and defense, and he says, "Oh no, he doesn't address all our needs. Did you see us play last year?" Which is really
I didn't
nice.
see that quote. I was actually laughing at a different Finley quote, which was literally as I was saying it, he was also being quoted as saying that I hate to put this comparison on him, but he kind of reminds me of a young Tyson Chandler.
Oh, which
That's
is funny because they
at.
do this to every, like they did that with Noel. They did it with
every
Cauley-Stein.
big
I know.
Man.
It's really
every
funny.
Single one. But that's a funnier quote, the one you had. I did not see that one.
He says, "Oh no, he didn't address all our needs. Did you see us play last year?" Which is just that's refreshing, to be honest. I mean, they know they have more work to do, and I mean, we know that. But let's be real. Like sometimes we don't know. You know, we like to assume that the teams know that, but they don't always know that. So, so that's nice to hear. Actually, it's funny, but it's also like there's obviously more work to do this offseason. And I think we felt that with the way the team talked toward the end of last season. Weird Mark Cuban press conference about Jalen Brunson notwithstanding. I think most of the comments from Nico and some other people with sourcing within the team, the reporters that were on the scene, it definitely felt like last season was the wake-up call. I think a lot of us maybe were hoping they would have had it a little bit earlier in terms of how they were building the roster, but it seems like they've had that wake-up call.
Well, and I think, maybe this is wishful thinking, but the night technically is still sort of young. We're still in the first round here if you're listening later. And there were reports pretty quickly, I think from Shams Charania or someone else that's a credible person, that the Mavericks were actively trying to shop that traded player exception that they were acquiring through the deal with Oklahoma City in an effort to either get a future pick or a pick tonight while also taking on a larger veteran contract, fill that TPE, which I believe was also, I think John Hollinger at The Athletic said that if it was as part of the deal with Oklahoma City then being made a 3-team deal, that the Mavericks could take back up to $21 million in salary, even though that TPE is, I think, at 16 or 17 million. So whether that's just, I don't know, PR or something, or just an effort to see fishing for what's out there, if the Mavericks are trying to get back in right now, that's pretty refreshing. It's pretty rare that the Mavericks, I know they did that technically last year by trading back in to get Jaden Hardy, but it hasn't been too often that they have been that active on a draft night where they're trying to get back in and get another first round pick.
Yeah. And to pour some cold water on that fire, their traded player exceptions are not used a lot.
Never
used. If you're a Mavericks fan, they've had like 2 or 3 of them in the last like 5 or 6 years, and they never used them. So
wasn't the Harrison Barnes trade? Didn't that bring back like a $1 zillion trade?
It was like the largest one ever. It was like 23 million, and they didn't use it. So.
But we say that, and then I swear, like a year or 2 ago, someone used a pretty sizable player exception on someone else, so other teams have used them. But I don't remember the last time the Mavericks did.
Yeah, and the one difference is there is a new CBA. There are some that is coming. There are some teams that are probably scared about how much money they owe to some players with this new CBA. So if there was a time for a traded player exception to maybe make some sense, maybe it's now. When I think, we don't know, but we assume that there are some teams that want to get off some bad money that could look even worse when this new CBA goes into effect, which I believe not this season, but the 2024-2025 season. Maybe it is this season. I can't remember. Either way.
No, following, yeah.
Yeah. Either way, when that CBA kicks in, whether it's this season or next season, I apologize not knowing the exact day. Some of those contracts that look bad right now are going to look even worse. Maybe the Mavericks can swoop in and be like, hey, we'll take that contract. Just give us a pick or something. I will say, I know this is live. There's still some
Josh, it happened.
What happened?
The Kings are trading Rashawn Holmes and the number 24 pick to Dallas.
There we go. Okay.
And Dallas is selecting Olivier-Maxence Prosper at number 24.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Now we're happy. Yeah, we got the smile. Or you're happy. Go, Jordan. You know this. I don't know this guy, but every draft person I've talked to loves this guy. Are you someone?
Yeah. I'm going to have to pull up notes. You may have to vamp a little bit. Yes, you are right. A lot of draft people have been high on him. He had a really impressive combine. And Ian, that was someone that Ian had pointed out from the combine as having a really strong week, and was moving up boards from kind of a fringe second round player into the first round. But I was still seeing him kind of in that range. So it's around that spot where he had kind of grown from being maybe mid 30s into a mid 20s draft pick.
Yeah,
but I guess the other question here is, the other part of that is them trading for Richaun Holmes, who is one of those guys that we have always talked about as like is he perfect for the Mavericks because of his skill sets as a lob threat, as an athletic guy. And I think we thought maybe he was a little past his prime as a center and maybe too expensive. But wow, that's, first of all, the first time I've ever done a live pod at all, but to also have this happen at the same time is making my head spin a little bit.
Yeah. So the thing with Holmes is that he has fallen off tremendously since I think Mavericks fans first wanted him. Holmes is more of the tax to get 24. He fell out of the Kings rotation. And the Kings needed bigs, by the way. So the fact that he fell out of their rotation, he's kind of washed. Like, I don't expect him to – I mean, he might get some minutes on the Mavericks because they just need big man depth so desperately. Like, he might be better minutes than JaVale McGee, for example. But I would not get too excited about him. The return here is getting back into the 24, which I was just saying before this happened, was I was saying, man, it would be cool if they could get into the bottom of the first, because when I was talking to Logan, this was the range with all the really nice wings available. Guys that you would want to take at 10 or 12, 11, but that look really good in this range. This guy, like you said, has risen up the boards. I'm going to go to our friend of the site, Brian Schroeder. He is one of our favorite draft analysts here at MMB, and he's a friend of the site. I'm pulling up his big board right now. He had Prosper as his 23rd best player, not for mock, just ranking players. He had him as the 23rd best player in his draft. So Mavs pick him with 24. That sounds like pretty good value. The pitch, he says, strong, big-bodied scoring four who can shoot. Prosper is a legit 6'8", 220 pounds. Offensive role, smooth scorer and streak shooter who can catch fire with the best of them. Defensive role, classic combo forward without a defined role on defense, but has some good traits. Like you said, he was a big riser in the draft process with the combine. I think he was someone that kind of came out of, I can't remember. Was he someone that had a lot of high expectations with Marquitte and he didn't meet them, or did he kind of was he a late bloomer?
That I don't know, actually. Okay. I mean,
do you know if he was a big high school guy? I don't know.
I don't know that either.
Okay.
I don't know. He was not someone that I tracked very heavily going through the season. And really, because he came on a little late for me, I didn't do the same kind of research I would have on the back end to see where he came from on that regard. So I'm not the expert in that department, but I mean, he is athletic and that energetic defender, which is what I was talking about earlier with, do you take Case and Wallace at 10, he could be that explosive defender that you need on the perimeter, which is, I mean, that's exciting. Because of, he's not going to be the guy that demands the attention I mean, not to say that would have been Case and Wallace either. I don't know enough about him personality wise to say that, but he's going to be an active role player, an energy role player. And can be, he can be that hyper active, aggressive defender along the perimeter.
Yeah. Fits the mold, like what we were just talking about. They needed a wing. They needed a big wing.
Yes.
This was, and I'm telling you, this is a guy that a lot of draft people really like. You look at his stat. I mean, something that I like, no, it's not always great, but I just like guys that produce in college, which is funny because Dereck Lively did not. I understand, but
not at all.
But I don't want to. That's like not. It's kind of like a cherry on top, like because the big thing for me was like Desmond Bain for 4 years at TCU Power Conference, like just continually produced and got better, like just consistent. And I'm looking at Prosper's college year, his sophomore year. I mean, 15.5 points, 6 rebounds a game, true shooting percentage above at 61, almost 62, which is really good for college, especially in a power conference. Marquette Big Ten or Big East? I can't remember. Big East.
Ooh, yeah.
Free throw percentage 71. Rim percentage, he shot 70% at the rim, and he shot 34.5% from three. That seems cool. That seems like what they need. This is someone that I think, talking to draft people, like this could be the 4. Like this is someone that they could mold into being like a starting 4, almost maybe like this is the guy. Like if you can't get Taylor Hendricks, like he almost seems like, I might be going crazy here, but almost maybe similar type of players, but maybe just not as, just different talent level. I don't know. I didn't watch this guy. I'm really sorry. I wasn't prepared. But everyone I've talked to says this guy was a really, really good wing prospect. And I like the fact that he can already shoot. I hate teaching guys to learn how to shoot. That's never one of my favorite things. So I don't know. This is cool. I mean, they addressed their 2 biggest needs coming into this draft was they needed a big man and they needed a wing. They got both of them.
Yes.
And they're both they're both the draft guys like. I mean, I don't know what else to say, Jordan. This is awesome. Yeah,
I mean, the reason the reason that the good teams are picking at the end, not the reason they pick at the end of the first round, but in picking at the end of the first round, a lot of times they are getting players that are going to be the high-end role players. So it doesn't have to be a swing for the fences move like you would. Like that's where I think some of how we were talking about the 10th pick that turned into the 12th pick was like your mind, I guess, dreams a little bit when you're at that point in the draft. Is like, maybe we can get the undiscovered or the underrated talent that turns into a star level player. That's what you think maybe you can get at 10 or 12. But when you're picking around 24 or mid to late first round, you're looking for those. A lot of times those are the guys that come to the surface, are the players that are going to be the elite role players. And I think that's what Prosper's I think that's what his avenue is going to be, and he could be that quickly. So that's exciting, because it was exactly the things that I was arguing against about leaving the 10th pick on the table or taking a center there. I don't want to say they solved all of that here, but it's at least exciting to see that they identified that and found a way to use the TPE immediately, which is what I think I'm seeing as reported, that they're taking Richaun Holmes into that TPE. So they're actually using it. Whether Holmes is going to be a solution or an actual rotation player, I don't know. He fell out of that Kings rotation at some point, I think early to mid last season. But they're solving some issues here tonight, which that's more than I could ask for, or at least attempting to. They've identified. We can all agree on the problems. They're on the same page as us in finding these players to meet those needs.
Yeah, and I think I've been trying to look around, because again, Prosper, I did not talk enough about him in the pre-draft process, and this is all catching us off guard. And it looks like the reason why he maybe wasn't a higher rated prospect was his stocks, his steal block numbers in college were not what you'd want to see from a 6'8" long, powerful athlete that he is. So that's maybe that's why he's available where he is in the 20s, and maybe that's why he wasn't taken somewhere between 10 and 20, because draft people, that's like their Bible stat, like looking at the steals and block rates for guys in college. For whatever reason, that's like a big indicator of if you're going to be a successful draft player. I guess because it goes into a lot of athleticism and intuitiveness, and if you're a good defender, you're always going to stick around in the league. So His numbers apparently weren't what you would want from a guy that has his physical profile, but apparently I think he answered a lot of those questions in the combine and in workouts. I'm looking on Twitter. I'm seeing reports from reporters that were like, he blew people away in workouts. And he was a guy that showed himself very well, like in 5-on-5s, like with other prospects. So like,
well, and I think, I mean, I don't, do we know, did he come in and work out for the Mavericks? Was that reported on or not?
I don't know. I mean, with the Mavericks, they don't tell you who's working. No one tells
I just
you
know. Well, I do remember at some point a report, and I don't know if maybe there were no names that were being named, but there was at some point an indication that the Mavericks had maybe been working out several players that were seen as late first round, mid to late first round players, which was sort of reinforcing this idea that they were shopping the 10th pick and looking to move back or acquire extra picks or something. So, you know, the positive in all of that is that there shouldn't be question about that they've done their due diligence here. That wasn't like they were just kind of swinging for the fences or running wild after they made the first move, that they were prepared to do something like this and identified the player that they wanted. That's, you know, the hope. And I think that might be the case here, just because he is that long, athletic perimeter defender that, I mean, I spent the first half of this pod whining about, and I think we were talking about early on, is wanting to find some wing defender that could provide that. And I think maybe they found that. Yeah.
And this is, this is just good work. I mean, they traded for a first round pick, by the way. This is the first time they've acquired a first round pick through trade since 2004 for Devin Harris.
That's unbelievable. That's an unbelievable piece of trivia.
They acquired a 2010 first rounder, the 25th pick, but they straight up bought that one from the Memphis Grizzlies in 2010. It was not a trade. They just bought it because that's where we were in that era of the NBA where like late first rounders felt like they were worthless. You know, in that late 2000s, early 10s era of the NBA basketball. But yes, the Mavericks have finally traded for a first round pick. That's great. And they went after, like we said, the two things that they needed, and you can't really fault them for that. And they played the board as it was, which I think is really fun too. Like it doesn't seem like they panicked. You know, it might not have been in the order that we wanted in terms of wing and big. They went big first, then wing, but you know, you can only get the players that are there. You know, we can, you know, maybe they really wanted Taylor Hendricks, but you know, it doesn't turn out that way. You have to go to plan B, plan C, and plan D. And that's one of the things we've always talked about with the Mavericks is we always felt like, do they have a plan? And it feels like tonight they had a plan, and that's a really nice feeling.
I find myself in the moment trying to like temper any not enthusiasm, but like overexcitement, because we were just talking earlier today about how excited many of us were about the 2020 draft when they traded back in and got some players that I felt and others felt were good early second round prospects, and that maybe they were like really identifying some key development things. So I'm trying to like not get overly excited and remind myself that I've had similar feelings before, but it is this is a different mode of operation for this Mavericks front office and the team as a whole in terms of how they just haven't for the longest time invested much into young draft players. And this is night one, right? So like, we don't know what's going to happen to either of these rookies, how they fit into the roster, how they'll be utilized early on. But it's exciting to think that like the things that we have complained about them needing to do seem to be the same things that they agree with that, and that they actually use the draft to maybe find long-term development solutions to those things rather than trading picks away in order to, I think I said this earlier already, but trading picks away to get 1 or 2 year rentals on veterans who are either past their prime or are distressed assets in some way. This is more than I could have asked for. And I guess I like to talk about the draft stuff, but I know you were, as I was like scanning through notes and things, talking a little bit about Holmes, but I think you were saying like, let's not get carried away. He's probably not going to do anything. Where does he fit into this puzzle? Is he, the big question, I'm asking you tons of questions here, and which isn't fair, but Powell is a free agent right now. Dwight Powell is. So JaVale McGee and Maxi Kleber, and am I forgetting some? I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. Is there another center
for the big man rotation? Yeah, it's just JaVale, Maxi, Powell, now Holmes, now Lively.
And technically Powell is not technically at this point not a Maverick. Does Richaun Holmes become the starter, and that alleviates you having to sign Dwight Powell? Because then you're dealing with, if you sign Dwight Powell, now you have Lively, Powell, Holmes, Kleber, McGee. Do you need that many centers on a roster? I know they're trying to, there were reports that they were trying to find ways to move McGee's contract. So maybe you move McGee somehow and then sign Powell to a short-term deal or something. But where does Holmes fit into all of that?
That's interesting, because you're right. If they re-sign Powell, that's a lot of bigs. Yes. And that's a lot of bigs that won't be playing a lot. Like when you think about like a McGee specifically, and you think about, where is Lively going to fit in? Is he going to play right away? Holmes is a player I was interested in, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but he fell off. Like he fell off dramatically in the last 12 to 18 months. We think about Sacramento and think about that series against Golden State, and think about how they needed minutes. When Sabonis wasn't on the floor, he got played off the floor. They had nothing. Like they did not play a backup big because that's how far Holmes had fallen out of the rotation. They just went 5 out. And they did that most of the regular season. Holmes averaged 8 minutes a game last year, only played in 42 games. By far his worst season of his pro career, even worse than his rookie year. He something, I don't know what happened to him. He is 29. Wouldn't say you would think he would fall off that quickly, but I don't know if he is playable right now. But again, is he more playable than McGee? Maybe, but I don't know. That's not a great question that you want to ask yourself. I don't know. Holmes just feels, I think Holmes is going to be the tax. I don't know if they're going to actually play him.
I thought he was actually, I think I said earlier that his contract he was getting overpaid, and he, I guess technically is if he's playing 42 games and only 8 minutes a game, but he's only making $12 million, which was less than I thought he was making like 15, 16 million, which, those are small numbers, I guess. In grand
he's technically owed more. He's technically owed more money for longer than Bertans. Funny enough, because Bertans.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think Bertans is only guaranteed 5 next year with the way his contract structured. So I think Holmes will be making more money than Bertans, not this season but next season. But again, you get a first rounder, so.
Yes. The whole point. That's the initial report from Shams Charania was that they were trying to use that TPE immediately to get back in and get another pick. So they were not trading for Holmes. That was not the point. They were trading to get back into the draft. I was just curious because Holmes was a name that he was just one of those guys, like Christian Wood, to be honest, one of those guys that was like flashed some offensive ability as a young center that Mavericks fans talked about. It seemed like every few off seasons for a bit there. And it was only 2 seasons ago that he was averaging 14 points and 8 rebounds a game, playing 29 minutes a game. He was a starter the full season, 61 games that year. And Sacramento, I don't think was great that season, but it wasn't that long ago. And so is that, just like Lively, is there a thought that like, does Luka elevate him just enough that he becomes a usable piece, not a full-time starter, not a 35 minute per game, 30 minute per game center? But I'm just curious what what that is, or do they just re-sign Powell to a 1-year deal and Holmes just rides the bench next to JaVale McGee for the next 10 months?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I wonder, because they're going to have to make that decision before they know how ready Lively is. They're not going to, train. They're going to have to know that before they get to training camp and they see Lively and they feel confident. I guess what they do with Powell, they'll answer that question. If they re-sign Powell, then we'll know that they maybe don't expect Lively to start right away, and they don't think Holmes is playable. If they don't re-sign Powell, then maybe then we'll know that they either think Holmes is something that they can feel like they can get something out of, or they're going to throw Lively in the deep end maybe quicker than we thought. So we'll see. That's really interesting to think about because, it's hard to think of Dwight Powell not on the Mavericks. It just feels like he is eternally here.
So it looks like he has a player option. Holmes does.
He's probably taking it.
Yep. He has a player option summer of 24-25.
Yep. For how much?
12.8 is what's being reported.
He will not be making 12.8 if he opts out of that player option, judging by what happens.
So they took on, like you're saying, they took on money there. They shed Bertans his deal, but they actually took on more money here, I suppose, right?
Yes.
I guess I don't.
One thing I don't know.
That's how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I don't know about the cap right now is I don't know if this affects them opening up the full mid-level exception, which they did when they traded Bertans. So I don't know if that goes away now. I don't know if using the TPE means they get to keep it or not. I'm sure
Say that again. Say that one more time.
I'm trying to figure out if they still get to keep the full mid-level exception that they opened up when they traded away Bertans, because now they're taking in Holmes's money. I don't know if using the TPE makes a difference.
So I'm looking in Slack as we're going through here too. And Matt shared a tweet from someone who said that Holmes has a trade bonus worth $1.8 million that will adjust his 23-24 salary to 13.9. Dallas will have $3.1 million remaining from their TPE. Mavericks $52 million below the tax with 10 players, plenty of room to sign Kyrie Irving and use the 12.4 MLE. So I suppose that means the 12.4 MLE will still be available.
Okay, well then there we go. I will trust that over.
Yeah, I guess I don't. We need an actual cap expert here because I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
this is someone from Hoops Hype is the one that reported that.
Yeah, but hey, if that came into this, so they took 10 and Bertans and turned that into Dereck Lively, Prosper, and opening up your mid-level exception, which feels like Rashawn Holmes, which think of him as you will. Who knows if he's going to play or not? But wow, that's pretty cool. Prosper has a 7'1" wingspan.
Yeah,
man,
he's long and athletic. Yeah,
so he's not just because the one thing with Dorian, I love don't want to knock on Dorian, was he was long and a decent, but he wasn't a guy that jumped out of the gym. I don't know if Prosper is either, but it seems like he is an elite tier athlete from what I'm seeing, which I don't necessarily know if Dorian was as good as he was with the Mavericks.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you just look at some tape of Prosper and you can just see he has like a large frame. Like he is just an athletic large frame that if you're pointing to someone like Dorian, didn't have that kind of frame. I mean, Prosper is also long and thin. He's not super thick athletically, but he just has a frame where you could see him putting on more muscle and being that guy that's just going to be a disruptor on the perimeter. I've seen now a number of people mention this, but he kind of has like that PJ Tucker defensive vibes, which I mean, I don't know when the last time the Mavericks had someone like that. I don't like putting comps out there, but if he could grow into that, alongside Luka on the perimeter defensively, or for Luka on the perimeter defensively. Like you can't ask for much more than that.
Yeah, and I think I'm seeing some Logan Thompson in Slack. Apparently, when Marquette played UConn, they put him on Jordan Hawkins and had him, and he chased him around screens. And you're trusting a 6'8" guy to move around screens.
And he can track. I mean, he can track through traffic. He can track through screens. He stays attached to the guy. Like those are the sort of things that the Mavericks have not had.
No,
someone who can fight through traffic to be that lengthy defender. They have not had that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think I wanted to circle back. We're at an hour, almost an hour and 10 minutes, so we need to wrap it up here. But I want to circle back to your point about how when we talked about the 2020 draft and how that was a universally lauded draft when it was over for the Mavericks, and how obviously it did not turn out the way that people expected. Not necessarily to be a negative Nancy about it, but just to offer some perspective. So even if these guys don't turn out the way that you want them to, the thing that's really impressed me tonight with the Mavericks is the process. We can't always teams can't always control the results. They can do as much as they can, player development, coaching, getting guys in the right situations, etc., creating the right environment for these guys to grow into the players that they can reach their full potential with. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings and not robots, and there's no telling what's going to happen. So for me, it's always been, is the process sound? Even if the results don't work, I can live with the decision-making if the process makes sense. The process makes a hell of a lot of sense tonight. And what have we been screaming about for a decade or longer? Use the draft. If you're not Miami, LA, New York, if you're not in one of those markets, you have to use the draft. And even if you are, Miami uses the draft. Like they get free agent meetings with everyone. They still use the draft. They still use the undrafted free agent market. They do their work. You cannot build a contender without using the draft in the NBA right now. You just cannot. You especially cannot if, again, you're not a team like the Lakers or the Clippers, where one of the best players in the game will just decide he wants to go to your market, which the Mavericks are not that team, despite how awesome Luka is. They're just not. So you have to use the draft, and they did. And if these guys don't work out, we can hem and haw about maybe other players they could have picked. But this is what we've been wanting them to do forever. It's felt like pulling a cow stuck, like a horse stuck in the mud, or whatever you want to call it. But they did it, and I think that's a cause. That's a cause for celebration. I'm being earnest here. This is what we wanted them to do, and they did it.
Well, and it's not just like for the sake of developing talent long term. It's also a financial reason to do that.
Yes.
They're constantly looking for a guy like Prosper on the trade market or in free agency that aren't coming here, but you're getting controllable years with a guy like that at an affordable rate that you're not going to get on the market like that. So, I haven't looked to see if there's anyone that is criticizing this move yet. I don't know what the criticism would be unless you just don't think Prosper is that guy. But this is, I think someone here in the chat had said that, but Martin, there's a comment here that this is about as creative as I've ever seen them be. And I fully agree with that, that they just, I guess you could point to them trading back in to get Hardy, who turned out to be a guy that looked like he could play some filler minutes here and there and might have more long-term potential. Or if you want to point back to the creativity of getting back into the draft in 2020, even though those players did not work out, that was still process that made sense at the time to say, like, okay, we're getting some development pieces here that could be around. But this is them really identifying their needs and finding creative ways to do it.
Well said. I don't know what else to say. So I think we should just wrap it up here.
I can't believe we're still in the first round. Like, just for people that are listening, it's still like the pick 30 is just now happening.
I know they could.
It's a long draft.
They could buy their way into the second round. We don't know. The Mavericks still might not be done, but they are running out of roster spots now. So there's only so much more. There's only so much more they can do. So we'll see. This is a good night for the Mavericks, regardless of what happens in the future. Check the site. I haven't checked our Slack enough. I'm sure it is on fire.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there will be a lot of stuff on MavsMoneyball.com. I am sure Kirk will come back full of piss and vinegar, ready to in the best of way. Not that he's mad. Just he will be ready to unload the takes, I'm sure. And he will be ready to do a live show to bring you guys up, I'm sure, sometime next week to talk about this, because there's a lot to talk about. It's fun now. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Go check MavsMoneyball.com for more draft coverage. Check this feed. We will probably do some more follow-up podcasts, maybe talk to more of our draft guys. Logan and Ian, maybe we can get them on. Maybe talk to some other draft people nationally to see what their reactions are. And we'll go from there. Jordan, thank you for joining me tonight. It's been a long night. I know it's not always easy. We are both parents of young children, so it's not always the easiest thing to do to just dedicate an entire evening to side gigs.
This is late night for me. This is late night. You're the late night guy, but this is super late for me.
That's true. Well, I appreciate you sticking it out.
Living wild.
Glad you had to have some fun. Glad you got to be on a live show where something broke in the middle of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You broke broke some news. That's great.
That felt very important.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap it up here. This is Pod Maverick. This is Josh Bowe. This is fellow editor MavsMoneyball.com, Jordan Brodess. We are signing off. We will talk to you guys later. Check the site and check this feed. We'll be talking more about it. Again, to kind of put a button on it. The Mavericks, so far, we don't know what else is going to happen if we're listening live. But the Mavericks turned the 10th pick and Davis Bertans into Dereck Lively with the 12th pick, and then trading back into the first round with the 24th pick to take, oh my God, what's his first name? Prosper. What's his first name? Omax? Olivier-Maxence Prosper. Marquitte forward, and then Dereck Lively with the 12th pick, the Duke center. We will talk to you guys later. Thanks for hanging out.